Hey, this is Kevin with the Comics Crowd. I'm here with Amanda Rachels.
Hi.
Back again for the Comics Crowd podcast, week number 2. How do you think it went last week?
It was fun for me, and I know you've been pretty pleased with the beef on it.
Yeah, the response has been pretty good. It's the second most downloads we've had for a podcast, and that's after taking like a 5-month hiatus just because of other priorities and not really having clear direction the first time around. So I think now we have kind of an idea of what we want to talk about and how we want to approach this in 20 to 25 minutes a week.
That works. And, it's just a matter of doing it to really start to get a feel for it, I think.
Yeah, it's been fun. We're going to keep doing it.
We'll get better.
Yeah, absolutely. So this week we are talking about the Kickstarter comics ending between June 13th and June 19th. So Friday to Thursday. We're going to talk about starting off in Kickstarter comics now versus when we started out, which was...
What, 2010?
2010. 15 years ago. I think Kickstarter was just a couple of years into existence at that point. We were not. We were well into our own existence at that point. But we had just started making comics. So I think we have some perspective to offer on this topic. And it really turned up a lot of interaction, a lot of comments on the Substack over at thecomicscrowd.substack.com. And it was an interesting conversation. I want to talk about that. But first, I want to catch up on what we've been doing. It's been a busy week for us. What have you been up to?
Oh my God, everything. It's a blur. Then doing Kickstarter fulfillment for Chainsaw Nose Jobs.
Chainsaw Nose Jobs, yeah. So we mentioned this last week, but we got the soft covers in like a week from the time that I ordered them, which is sort of unheard of in this day and age, especially from the really large printer that we use for collected editions. If it's perfect bound or case laminate hardcovers, we use a certain printer, and they can take a little while.
Seems like someone would board it.
Something we got raised up in the queue on the soft covers. Now the hardcovers, that's all we have left to fulfill, right? Are the hardcovers. And we're just waiting on those for the printer. I sent a query on Friday. So naturally, when I check the status on their website the next day, they're printing now instead of print ready. Yeah. So, and they're still within their time frames. They're still well within their time frames. So I'm not complaining, but we should have those typically when I see that printing status take effect. We'll typically have those within 5 to 6 business days. So I think we'll have them by the end of the week, and we can finish fulfillment by the middle of the following week.
It's so nice to live in a world with fairly accurate timelines and windows on which the printing happened. That used to give me tremors.
It's not always been that way, and the further we get away from COVID years of 20 and 21, the better, because things were complete chaos in those years when we were trying to get fulfillment done on time. No matter what we did right, something always went wrong on the other side. That's not happening as much now. It's really nice. And it's easy to take it for granted. We're finishing up Chainsaw Nose Job fulfillment in anticipation of the next project, which is...
A mandatory.
That's right. So tell us a little bit about how we released a mandatory the first time around.
The first time, well, we have 2 anthology comics. What are they, 116?
I think one is a little over 100 pages, and the other one is around the same, but just a bit fewer, maybe 98, something like that. So it's about 200 pages of material.
Yeah. It's a collection of short stories that I either drew. I did draw every one of them, but I may have written a couple of them. And it's just all work of mine put into one little spot. And as much as I loathe cutesy spellings, I kind of like the little play on my name.
Well, that was your idea, and it's worked out really well. Us, Gavin Michelli, our artist and colorist buddy over in Baton Rouge, posted about it after I shared it on Facebook earlier, and mentioned how much fun he had helping you make that cover, because he did the final rendering over your art on that. It looks amazing.
He's so good.
Yeah.
He did our cover for Flesh of White at the rendering of that.
I think he actually did the recoloring on the first issue of Flesh of White, if I remember correctly, before Nathan Lewis took over.
I think so.
Yeah, so he's done a lot of work for us, and especially on the design side of things, and super proud of that. So what we're doing with a mandatory now is, since then, it's hard to believe, but we first released a mandatory in 2016, so it's 9 years ago.
I'm in the flat circles.
Do you remember when the second one was released?
No.
2020. It was a long time ago. But since that time, you've done 3 stories with Gary Scott Beatty from Alzern Comics. You've done one with David Summey. And we're going to include all 4 of those stories. Thanks to those guys for getting us copies of each of those. We're going to include those in the new version of the mandatory. So there's brand new content, reworking all those pages, reformatting them to make sure they're all good. It's going to look amazing. I've been working through those files, getting those page files where we want them, and rearranging the order of the story so that it works a little bit differently than it did before. And for the first time, there's going to be an oversized hardcover of a mandatory. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Somehow I missed that.
Yeah, that's the focus of the campaign, sir. Launching on July 6th, and we'll run through July 20th. The promotional pre-launch campaign page is up now. All you have to do is go to Kickstarter and search on a mandatory. That's AMANDATORY, and it'll take you right to that page where you can give us a follow and help us get this book made. So this is all of Amanda's work. That's not Vicious Circus, Flesh of White, the book, and we're still going to be close to 164 pages of fresh material. It's a lot of art. You've drawn a lot of comics. Tell us about Whatnot. What's going on with Whatnot this week?
Well, Whatnot's on Wednesday nights on the Whatnot app. I live stream and I do live drawing. Got a pretty good group that hangs in there and gives me some fun challenges. This week, I think I did bump it back a day. I don't normally do that, but we had our Wednesday night live drawing on Thursday night. I was tired. But no, we had some fun stuff. I do a lot of trading cards on there. Sometimes they get me to draw monsters, and I love drawing the monsters. So like this week I got to do Solomon Grundy and Clayface, and I got to do a character from Cyberpunk on a bigger page, and I get lots of random stuff. My group are funny. Some get the same characters over and over and over and over again, and some you'll branch out and get a variety. And sometimes they treat me with characters that I am dying to draw. That makes a difference reading.
And so your handle on there is flatline_comics, correct?
Flatline comic.
One word.
All one word.
Okay. I should know that.
You should.
But on Whatnot, Flatline Comics, one word. You search there for a creator, Flatline Comics, one word, and you'll find Amanda and all of her scheduled Whatnot streams.
I might jump on there tomorrow. We see.
Cool. Well, what we wanted to talk about this week is starting off in Kickstarter. I wrote a Substack post for the Comics Crowd this week talking about an observation I made where first time or second time new creators to Kickstarter in the comics category are really struggling to get backers. There's so many. I made a lot of cases, and we're not going to talk about all that in detail. It'll be boring to talk those numbers here on an audio podcast or on YouTube. But so many have 0 to 4 or 5 backers within 24 hours of launch. They're doomed from the start. The rule of thumb is, and I picked this up from Tyler James over at Comics Launch over the years, the rule of thumb is if you don't have about 50% of your funding in the first 24 hours, that's a really bad sign for your success. Yeah. And we're seeing so many of these first-time creators that aren't getting 10% of their funding in the first 24 hours. Some do, but it's very rare. And you're generally seeing 30 or less backers across the board for a lot of these. If they're not somebody who's experienced with another account on Kickstarter and they're just opening a new account or something like that, if they're not experienced in some other way, if they're not branching out from other creators they work with on another account, newcomers to Kickstarter comics are struggling. So what I wanted to talk about, because at one point we were newcomers to Kickstarter comics, been 15 years, and we've seen some regression in our funding the last years, as a lot of creators have, a lot of self-publishers have. But what do you remember about getting started in Kickstarter all those years ago and the challenges that we faced then? And then we can talk a little bit about comparing that with what creators are going through now when they first start out.
But the challenges,
Yeah.
trying something new for one. And I mean, that was something very different, but not wholly different from what we had just come off of with the contest that we did for the Small Press Idol.
Yeah. For context, our first 12 pages of actual comic of sequential art and story were made as part of a competition online way back in 2009, 2010 called Small Press Idol. We're still friends with several of the guys that participated in that to this day. And that was our first 12-page, what we called then Clowntown, which is now Vicious Circus Comic.
Right. And that wasn't so much about funding as getting support, getting votes from people to support your project and vote you number one among this group of 50 or so.
Yeah, it got narrowed down to 10, I think, by the end of it, but it's been so long.
And then the benefit of going through that was learning how to build an audience that would stick with you, follow you, not just as, this book, but, me, Amanda, or Kevin. Because, they want to see what we did. What that could be was the secondary to wanting to support us as artists. And so that's the thing that I think people are coming into Kickstarter expecting it to be like, I'm featured on here. I've made it.
Right.
And that it's that you're going to be a diamond, among all of them.
Yeah, like my idea is so good that people are just going to see me in the middle of all the other projects and like it just as much as I like it.
Right. And you may have a really nice looking product, but there has to be some coordinated
like a grassroots movement or groundswell support sort of thing.
Something like that.
Yeah. Well, we were able to transfer our audience from Small Press Idol to Kickstarter for those first few campaigns that we did in I think our first Kickstarter was actually at the end of 2010 because we did 4 campaigns for Vicious Circus, which of course we called Clowntown back then. But most of that was fueled by people who followed us on Small Press Idol and came over. And then we built a second audience as part of the Kickstarter comics community, which was a fledgling group in 2010. Kickstarter was brand new. I think I have to look this up, but I think Kickstarter started in 2008. So it was very fresh at the time. And the comics category was just getting going when we got on there. And we were fortunate enough to draw enough interest that we kept making Vicious Circus for years after that. We came back and remastered the book with new colors, new lettering, and then we did it again when we went out of print on the second edition. And we're now on the 4th edition, including an omnibus that we did 2 years ago. Since 2010, what we built through Small Press Idol, social media, and Kickstarter conventions, we've been able to keep that book going right up to present. And then we've got the end of that book mapped out. That's how we started out, what we were able to do through Kickstarter for the last 15 years.
Yeah, I did a lot of chatting on message boards, not necessarily about that, like plugging, but I was on a lot of message boards and people need me and this is what I did.
That competition was actually run on a message board, which is not what would happen these days. So how does that compare with what we're seeing now? So as I mentioned, I'm seeing a lot of first-time creators. I look at every comics project every day that launches on Kickstarter, and they're coming out with no support or very little support. So they're not engaging ahead of time the way that we did, which was fairly unique, I think, because these competitions aren't everywhere. They still happen, but not in the same way. And I'm not sure they transfer the same way that they did back then.
Yeah. There is a more every man for himself kind of mentality with it.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. But I also think that people, because Kickstarter is so full of projects now, at any given point in time, outside of December, early January, you're going to see 230 to 300 plus campaigns at a time on there. That was not the case in 2010. You're talking about double-digit campaigns, less than 100.
Yeah.
And probably well less than 100 versus now we've got 3 to 4, maybe 5 times as many as you had back then. That's a lot of competition for eyeballs and for
money,
for pledges. Yeah. That's a lot to deal with now that we didn't have to compete with back then.
Right.
And it's not just the number of competing projects, it's the type of competing projects. We've talked about this. I'm not going to get into it deep today, but back then we did not have to deal with not safe for work projects and the gravitational pull they have on funding and attention and the off-putting effect they have on people that don't shop for comics on Kickstarter anymore because they're offended by seeing those projects on Kickstarter.
Yeah. And I don't even know when that really started to be as big of a thing as it is. I guess some people were hesitant about bearing all on there. It seems like they were policing things a little bit more and more.
A lot more.
Yeah.
They were policing things a lot more. And I'm not sure when that crossed the fulcrum to where we are now, where a lot of those projects get the projects we love tags. Some of them deserve it. I'm not saying they don't. As I've talked about ad nauseum, the amount of projects that are in that category and the amount of funding that they take from Kickstarter backers as a whole, and how that affects us as established creators. But think about how that affects new creators who don't have their own gravitational pull, who don't have their own orbit that an audience is already in, to see what they do, to look forward to what they do, to show up anytime they launch and offer support. They aren't there yet. It's tougher now. And I know Tyler commented on, and if there's an expert in Kickstarter comments, it's Tyler. He commented on my post. He said that it's a dubious assertion to say that it's harder for Kickstarter comics creators coming in new now than before. And I think it's a mixed bag. I'm not saying that that's a right or wrong assertion, but there are things that we have now we didn't have back then, and there were things we had back then that we don't have now. And it's really hard to say. I think it's tough in both directions, but definitely you're swimming in more shark-infested and deeper waters now than you were back in 2010.
And then ease of the platform as well, because there's a lot of features on there now that we would have killed for back then.
That's true.
There are so many campaigns that back in the day, they did the campaign and they promised all these things. They put in all these stretch goals, and then they got very, very heavy packages, and then they realized how much it cost to ship it, and they imploded.
And that was people that weren't prepared ahead of time, which you've always taken care of that side of things for us to make sure that we had those shipping rates right ahead of time so we weren't bushwhacked by high shipping costs that would deep six a campaign. But a lot of people didn't. I can think of examples of gigantic 6-figure campaigns that went under because of shipping, international shipping in particular, particularly around the time of COVID. There was a glut of those types of failures around that time just because of paper costs, and then shipping costs went wild. It's crazy. So yeah, you're right. There's more resources now, not just through Kickstarter with the add-ons as part of Kickstarter's interface, the pledge manager that they just launched.
Pledges.
Late pledges, reward images.
Oh.
You think that we've always had that because we're so used to it now. That's only a few years old.
Yeah.
That's something that was offered on other platforms like Indiegogo before Kickstarter, but we've got that now. And it's a bear to manage because if you have a number of rewards, but it matters. And they didn't have that back then. So I think you can make an argument both ways. And I think it really just comes down to how you prepared yourself to make comics, to market comics, to build an audience that's where your comic exists, to store, purchase, fulfill, and preserve those comics for future sale. There's just so much that goes into it.
Oh.
Yeah. And I think it's got to come down to the individual creators and how devoted they are to this entire process that you and I do by ourselves.
Yeah. And we're dedicated.
Yeah.
And it seems like in the beginning, some people didn't know how long this was going to last, if it was going to be a thing 10 years down the road. And some of them did treat it as a fly-by-night where they took the money and ran. And
That's true.
I remember seeing some of those updates, so it got wild. People throwing books on bonfire, and they got mad about getting questioned on where's my book.
I remember that.
Right?
Yeah. That specific case, I do remember that. I think I bagged that campaign, if I remember correctly.
Like I was saying last time, I bagged so many campaigns, and I ain't never seen the book. Some of them I had work in, and I never saw the book. Good God.
And I do think there's less of that sort of thing now, but it's hard to say. As I look at them when they launch, and I'll look at them if there's suspect activity that shows that they might not have been fulfilled later. But typically I don't look at whether they succeed or fail, or whether whether they are successfully fulfilled. That's just, I just don't have the time and the day to make it happen.
It's important. I know it's one thing that I always make sure that I'm trying to be transparent about, make sure everybody gets their rewards correctly marked, that they're shipped and everything. And so yeah, cat walking through. But I look at things like, I'll use for example Whatnot. It is very dedicated to upholding a quality of fulfillment,
right?
Because there's a time limit that starts once you sell an item. Their window is like 48 hours, and you ship it. And they've added some things to their seller hub, like where you can see the quality or the health of your account and how much you fulfill on time and successfully. Like there's no problem with the order, things like that.
Right.
And then you get customer ratings. And I think that Kickstarter could use a rating system for campaigns. But of course, there's the flaw in that is that people will review bomb.
Review bombing.
But you should make it for backers, people that actually bought from the campaign.
True. And I think you would still get review bombing in certain situations. I think people would back just for the right to review bomb. There's a whole culture around that, of course. But something needs to happen there. I agree. Something needs to happen there. And honestly, Kickstarter could implement that on their side. Let it be a full-time job for somebody, just from a feedback standpoint. We're just talking about the comics category. If they did that, they'd implement it for every category on Kickstarter, which was probably unmanageable.
It's just pipe dreaming. But
yeah, but something needs to get there. Yeah.
But I know Phil is running the comics category of Kickstarter. He was saying on Tyler James's YouTube stream a couple weeks ago that he was trying to do a monthly email where he spotlighted a dozen projects that were good, but you have to email him about them a few weeks in advance of your launch for it to maybe yield some eyes from his newsletter. But I think having like a creator spotlight like that could be something nice. I remember, in the Diamond catalog, they used to have the little feature. And I know you had to pay for it, but where you get a...
Not always. I mean, I know people that just got it because they were new to the catalog and Diamond was trying to help them out. On Kickstarter, that's supposed to be projects we love, and that's a whole different podcast, and we can talk about that another time. And there's just, as he admitted, as multiple Kickstarter leads over the years have admitted, there's just really no rhyme and reason to it. It's literally a book that they like for whatever reason.
I just consider it like going to the bookstore and seeing the employee picks.
Yeah.
That's basically what it is.
I was at comic shop on Wednesdays when they put the books that they liked up on the counter with Stephanie's pick or whoever, they would just put them up there.
Hey, who does a really, really great spotlight? Acme Comics in Greensboro. Hey, Jermaine.
What would you recommend for people just starting out now, based on our experience, based on what we've talked about, based on what you read that I found when I was going through these new campaigns that are struggling?
I think you really have to be trying to build an audience outside of Kickstarter to bring with you, but also be talking to creators that are on there. You've got to do a lot of homework before you start, and not just about how to run the campaign, but how to fulfill it. Just all these logistical elements that you may not know just coming into it as as just an enthusiastic creator. My first little book, I printed it at a local shop and sold them to people by even,
Right.
But it's changed, thank God.
Now there's so many resources available online, including just a million YouTube videos on the various aspects of making comics, printing comics, preparing comics for press, fulfilling comics, and there are service after service about promotion. Be very careful with those. Handling your inventory after the fact and shipping. Now, most people aren't going to need those things,
right,
but educate yourself before you get started to increase your chances for success. You can participate in Tyler's Comics Launch program for not a lot of money a month and get so much value just in the first few weeks, learning just the basics of how to manage the Kickstarter side of things. The marketing side of things that is not common sense. This is not something that everybody comes into this just knowing. It's tough. It's the toughest part of it. It's something I'm still not very good at.
One of the things that has its own language.
It is. And not only that, but if you're trying to make comics and you don't know how to make a comic, which is something I do see on Kickstarter, comics that obviously could be better, that are technically not where they need to be to get an audience. Mm-hmm. There's so many ways to learn that now.
Yeah.
And most of them are free on YouTube.
Right. It's very important to be watching that, but try to engage in group chat, whether it be on Blue Sky or what's left of Facebook or Instagram or whatever, but don't just say, find my book. Yeah. Engage.
Right.
Well, let them know who you are. Ask about their stuff.
And if you need to learn more about actually making comics, go to big cons where there are big creators doing panels. Mm-hmm. We used to do a lot more conventions than we do now. And I took the time to go to writing panel after writing panel by the greats, by the legends. And I learned so much about scripting, about storytelling, about specifically storytelling in comics that I would never have learned anywhere else. Don't feel like you have to go pay $1,000 to set up a table, but maybe just buy a ticket as an attendee and go check out those panels, learn something, teach yourself something, ask questions. But don't go into Kickstarter blind or unprepared or underprepared when you can put your best foot forward in terms of the quality of your book, the quality of the art, your knowledge of how Kickstarter works and how to show up with people that are there to pledge when you launch your campaign. If you're just crossing your fingers, hoping that somebody's going to back your project, you're probably not going to see that.
Right.
So take advantage of the resources that are there these days. It's really tough. Kickstarter is a lot murkier, a lot busier.
It is intimidating.
If you're really interested in making comics, it sucks to get on there and be discouraged by a failed campaign. It would be awful to lose your interest in something that matters that much to you because of just being not ready to go.
Yeah.
In that aspect of things, when you could take another few months, a lot more effort, and be ready to go.
Mm-hmm. I do definitely feel bad for those who get on there and have a failed campaign to start and don't really have the support of any experience around them. Or some people are too shy to ask. I'm an introvert, but I'll talk about this kind of stuff because it's not personal to me, but more in like wanting to put something out there that is mine. That's personal to me. And I get how hard that can be to put out there and talk about and say, look at what I did. And even more than that, would you like to buy what I did? It's really putting you in a vulnerable spot.
I think it took us years to feel comfortable on the front end of this. And we are comfortable now being confident about our work and presenting it to people with pride instead of with trepidation. We're like, would you like to see my comic? It's like, hey, I think you'll like this. Check it out. You know, hand them an open book to see the art, to see the story, to see what's going on. And it makes so much of a difference in how people receive what you're showing.
Mm-hmm. It's funny to me. I notice about myself. See, I'll be all introspective and everything on here. But like I'll get on Whatnot, and normally you see the view of my desk and my hand drawing, and I'm talking, and just the mic's up here by my head. But then the moment that you put me on a camera like this, I'm just like, hi.
Okay, let's bottom line this. Take the time to get it right.
Yeah.
On all aspects, and don't launch until you're confident that you have an audience, that you have the product that you want to put forward with your name on it, and that you know how to handle it once the campaign is ended.
Mm-hmm. And you could even if you could start small,
Always start small.
Right. But start small in get some art together, get a story together, and say, I want to produce a preview, like an ash can or something like that. And at least use that to put your ideas out there in front of people and maybe build a little audience so that when you come up with the whole project or an issue of the project, you're that much further along because you've generated some buzz and some familiarity with your...
Absolutely. All right. Let's talk about some of the comics that launched in the past week. Did you have one that you like more than the others?
I like Somebody Died at Adventureland.
I don't remember that one.
Oh no, it was the one that like the theme park. There's a dead body. The theme park.
Oh, I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a great.
That story premise. I guess it was issue 2, but
Yeah.
Kickstarter. But I was pretty anxious, and I like the one that in the same article right before it, about the thousand moons, or the planet of 1,000 moons, and something like that. The food truck that travels.
Yeah.
Ingredient that's kind of my speed. I like sci-fi and I like food, so
And those are kind of weird concepts that I thought were really cool.
I did that.
Yeah, and the one that I really thought was offbeat and interesting was a not safe for work book called Voltessa, written by Justin Gray, who I think has worked with Jimmy Palmiotti in the past. But he describes it as a gothic sex comedy in the Frankenstein universe. And just reading the preview pages, I was laughing to myself. It was super funny. It's more of a parody than a straight up book of sexual content.
I thought the art was good.
Art looks cool. It looks like real comic art to me.
I like that one too.
There was a variant cover that just looked like a classic Marvel cover for this book that I thought looked amazing. The art is by Antonio Brandao and colors by Tiago Brandao. Beautiful work, funny, different, a different take on not safe for work, and highly recommended. It's Voltessa, Voltessa. You can just search for that on Kickstarter, and I'll include the link to each of those books that we mentioned in the notes. So I think that's it for this week. If you have any questions, any input on this topic, please leave a comment. We'd love to talk about it more.
All right. Don't forget to look out for a mandatory, the collected edition.
July 6th, but you can follow it on Kickstarter now. All right. Thanks. We'll talk again next week.